to make it very, very clear that Russian aggression and further incursion into Ukraine is absolutely unacceptable. We are standing there with diplomatic responses, with sanctions, with a full press on the international stage to ensure that Russia respects the people of Ukraine, respects their choice to choose their governments and their direction. We will always be there for the people of Ukraine, and Canada will continue to stand with our allies in defending our friends in Ukraine.
A busy week around the world, and this is where we ask BATRA's burning questions. A lot of people are observing what's going on in Ukraine, but is anything being done? I've got Lori Goldstein and Lauren Gunter with me, so maybe they can answer some of the questions that we should be getting from our politicians. Now, back in 2014, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper said a very poignant thing to Russian President Vladimir Putin. In 2014, he said to Putin, "Get out of Crimea." Now, of course, that stems back to in March of 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. And the world, well, some people did something, but many didn't. Now, fast forward to where we are today in 2022. Russia is once again trying to Bigfoot and make moves against Ukraine. Lauren Gunter, Justin Trudeau, a very different approach than Stephen Harper when it comes to dealing with Ukraine and dealing with Russia. Recently, Prime Minister Trudeau was asked about what they're going to do. They will not be providing arms, as the Ukrainian people have been desperately asking for in case of an incursion from Russia. But our foreign affairs minister was recently there, and she didn't really do much, Lauren.
No, and don't expect them to. There was an announcement that the Liberal government will lend the Ukrainian government $120 million to help with whatever, but not buying arms. Actually, I think Trudeau has been kind of dodgy on the whole arms thing. I don't suspect we will sell arms to the Ukrainians, but he hasn't outright rejected the idea of selling them something. But you know, we have a training mission there from the Canadian Armed Forces that's due to run out at the end of March. He has not said, as I think he should have, that training mission will stay there for as long as Ukraine is threatened by Russia. He's not even willing to do that. And so, yeah, I'm not sure that Harper's threat or Harper's caution to Putin achieved a whole lot. Russia did eventually annex Crimea, despite what Harper said to Putin.
And I think we send the message, as we have in Canada, whether it takes 5 months or 50 years, we're not going to drop the subject until Ukrainian territory is returned to Ukrainians.
But there is, from the West, there is just nothing but mealy mouth. Joe Biden, the U.S. president, said
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc.
What does that mean? What does it mean, minor, major? If you're a Ukrainian and the Russians come into your country, minor, major doesn't matter. It is an incursion. You've been invaded. It's an act of war. And you have to know that your allies, especially the big ones like the United States, are going to step up and send troops. It has to come to that. The Americans have to commit that if the Russians invade, they will send troops.
Officials tell us the president is looking at plans by air, by sea, and on the ground to fortify NATO allies in Eastern Europe, not send these assets into Ukraine. The mission is to deter Putin and protect our NATO partners.
And that is really dangerous. I get that. But I don't know what else you can do that would back Putin off. I mean, Putin is a thug. He's a tough guy. He's in desperate situations economically at home, so he has to have some sort of foreign diversion. And this is it. He's threatening to reinstate the glory of the Soviet Union by retaking Ukraine. And what are we doing? The Brits are sending hundreds of troops to NATO members bordering Ukraine as a signal to Russia that they're prepared to send them in if the Russians invade. And we're sending $120 million, which is pocket change to these guys. They would give that to a single community in Canada if that community claimed that it was going to have some sort of diversity inclusion festival. So it's a nothing gesture.
So, Lori, I think that Lauren brings up a good point in terms of the leadership on this side of the pond in North America. The Americans are looking weak with President Biden, and Canadians under Justin Trudeau, well, I can't imagine we would ever see any show of strength. I mean, Justin Trudeau can't even, push back against China, so let alone Russia. Canada is home to the largest diaspora of Ukrainians in the world, and my home province in the province east of Lauren, in the province of Saskatchewan, thousands and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian families have many still over there and are very worried. And realistic concerns are that Russia is going to do what it always does: be the world thug, be the bully of the world, and just march right in, and no one will challenge him.
Well, for Trudeau, let's consider his political base. Do they want a shooting war with Russia where Canadian soldiers are dying? As you say, there's a very strong Ukrainian community here, but when he looks at his political base, that's the last thing they want. So, but I think it's even greater than that. We need to realize that the world has changed. We always were protected under the umbrella of the United States, and it was the world's leading superpower. It's being challenged on two fronts: China and Russia. And it has a president right now who is weak. There's a widespread perception in the American public that he overpromised and undelivered on his two key promises: to get the pandemic under control and to help economic recovery. He can't even get his Build Back Better plan through. It's hung up in the Senate. He just lost his thing on the Voting Rights Act to encourage voting. For whatever reason, this is a weak president who has no political capital to spend on Ukraine. That's why he committed what I would call a gaffe, which is when a politician accidentally tells the truth. It's what Lauren mentioned when he said basically, well, it's okay if it's a minor incursion, and then we can decide what we do or don't do, right? Like NATO would have to decide based on that. So he's done two things. He signaled that some sort of incursion is acceptable, and NATO is divided.
Big nations can't bluff, number one. Number two, the idea that we would do anything to split NATO, which would be have a profound impact on profound impact on one of Putin's objectives is to weaken NATO.
And that's the key. The only thing that would stop Putin, and we know this from 2014, would be a united NATO led by the United States. They don't have to go to shooting right away, but they would have to go to economic sanctions, very harsh right away. And as Lauren pointed out, Putin's vulnerable on that. His economy is not in good shape. They do have the threat of shutting off gas supplies to Europe because of their Gazprom natural gas plant. But that's so you don't have to start firing, but you would have to have serious economic sanctions. Canada's dabbled in that in a few areas, the Americans. But I think if you look at this realistically, Putin's going to do what he wants to do, and he's not going to be stopped.
What do you think? Are you watching? Are you seeing what Russia is doing? Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we, of course, want to keep you always informed here at The Sun. So subscribe to the Midday Sun.